My name is Margaret Thompson. I am 82 years old and live in Savannah, Georgia. Throughout my life, my faith in Jesus Christ has been my foundation, my guiding light. And, as you will soon see, it has also been my turning point. I was always that lady everyone in the neighborhood knew as Bible Grandma. Every day, without fail, at 6 in the morning, I would kneel beside my bed and give thanks for life, for my children, for my grandchildren, and for the privilege of being able to live another day. My house was simple, cozy, full of old pictures, prayer books, and always smelled of freshly brewed coffee and buttery cookies. But even with all this peace around me, something inside me began to change. I began to feel a different kind of tiredness, something that neither rest nor prayer could take away. My steps became slower, my heart heavier. It was one Sunday afternoon after church that I felt that pain, a strong pressure in my chest, as if the whole world wanted to push me back down to the ground. I remember holding my granddaughter Lily's hand and saying, "If Grandma falls asleep and doesn't wake up, just know that I went to see Jesus." I was rushed to the hospital. Everything was silent. The white lights, the sounds of the monitors, everything seemed far away. The doctors rushed over, saying it was an acute heart attack, a critical condition, and for the first time, I said goodbye. But what no one expected, not even me, was that that farewell would not be the end. It was just the beginning. And before I tell you what I saw on the other side, something that changed my life forever, I want to ask you something very simple, but very important. If this story touches your heart, if you believe that there is something greater waiting for us, like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, more people will be able to hear what happened to me, and maybe rediscover their faith too. The emergency room smelled of disinfectant and tension. I could hear muffled voices, hurried footsteps, but everything seemed to be getting farther and farther away. It was as if my body was there, but I was no longer in it. I remember looking up at the white ceiling and thinking, "Is this it, Lord? Is this how it ends?" But inside me there was no fear. There was peace, a deep peace, even a strange one, as if something was saying to me, "You are going home." My son David was holding my hand. He tried to smile, but his eyes were red. My granddaughter Lily was crying softly, hugging her mother. I wanted to say, "It's going to be okay," but my voice wouldn't come out. All I could do was close my eyes and think, "If I see you, Jesus, receive me with mercy." The heartbeat on the monitor began to slow. First, a slow beep, then silence. A doctor shouted something like, "Asystole," and the alarm started. My body shook. They tried to revive me. 3 shocks, nothing. They declared me dead. 7:42 p.m. Time without vital signs. 7 minutes. 7 minutes of clinical death. But time there didn't work like it does here, because it was exactly at that moment that everything changed. I saw no tunnels. I saw no darkness. I saw light. A warm, golden light that seemed to embrace me. It was like being enveloped in pure love. I felt no pain, no fear, just belonging. I felt that I was not alone. There were presences all around me. Was I flying? Was I walking? I can't explain it. I only know that I moved effortlessly, as if my entire being was being guided by something greater. I began to hear sounds, not voices, but a kind of melody, like a choir that was sung not with the mouth, but with the soul. And then I realized I was somewhere between heaven and earth. I found myself in a field. It seemed to be made of light. The grass shone. The sky was an impossible blue. And in the distance, something was calling me. A brighter glow. A growing heat. It wasn't the sun. It wasn't fire. It was presence. Jesus. He was there. And I knew. Even without seeing clearly, even without hearing his name, the heart recognizes when it finds its creator, but it was not yet time to reach him. Before, I needed to see everything that life showed me, and everything I didn't want to see. And that's what I'm going to tell you next, because it was there, in that place between worlds, that my soul began to be stripped bare. And my dear, what I saw will make you rethink your own life. I can't tell if I blinked, or if my soul just woke up. But in that moment, there, in that field of light, everything was so real, more real than anything I've ever experienced on earth. There was no pain, no weight on my shoulders, no memory of suffering, just lightness, as if every part of me had been washed in love. The air, if you can call it that, seemed to vibrate. It was a mixture of soft scent, sound, and warmth. Every step I took felt as if creation itself were whispering, "You are welcome." I looked at my hands, and they glowed, not with their own light, but reflecting something much greater. There were no mirrors, but I felt like I was no longer old or young. I was eternal, whole, healed. I began to hear voices in the distance, not words. Voices, some familiar, others forgotten by time. My mother, my father, my sister who left too young, my grandfather who read the Psalms aloud. They all seemed there, close, as if they had been waiting for me for decades. But none of them touched me. They just watched. They smiled. They transmitted peace. Ahead of me was a path, a sort of trail made of pure energy, a golden glow that moved, adjusted as I advanced. And I advanced, without haste, without fear. It was like returning home after a long journey. My heart beat, if it still beat, in a rhythm of reverence. But the more I walked, the more I felt a weight returning. Not physical, but spiritual. Memories, words I had hurt, people I had failed to love as I should have. Silences that hurt more than screams. Everything came to the surface, as if my soul was being invited to see with God's eyes. That's where I stopped. Before me appeared something that looked like a bridge. Yes, a bridge suspended over nothing. On one side, what I knew, my journey, my life, my failures and successes. On the other, what I could not yet understand, judgment, truth. And there, right in the middle, was He. Not in human form, not as a church image, but like a presence, a light more intense than all the others, and at the same time soft. It was as if every particle of Him had known me forever. My spirit knew I was before the throne. I was before Jesus. And there, in that moment, everything would change. But before I tell you what He said to me, yes, He spoke to me. I want you to take a deep breath. Because what comes next is not just about me. It's about you too. The bridge wasn't made of stone or wood. It was made of living light, a glow that pulsed beneath my feet, as if the path itself could feel me walking on it. Each step brought back memories, not as vague recollections, but as vivid scenes, as if I were living it all over again. I remembered the day I accepted Jesus at age 12, at the old Baptist church in my neighborhood. I remembered the feel of the wooden bench creaking under my little legs, the smell of the pages of the freshly opened Bible, the peace I felt when I repeated, "Lord, I accept you." And He did. I also saw the days when I was hard, when I allowed hurt to speak louder than love. I saw faces of people I failed to forgive, words that could have healed, but I kept hidden out of pride. All of this came to the surface, and I cried. They weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of pure regret, a regret without condemnation. It was as if heaven itself was saying, "Yes, you failed, but you are still loved." I kept walking. Around the bridge, human shapes began to appear, but not like ghosts or scary apparitions. They were like silhouettes made of soft light. Some of them came from far away, others very close. I felt that some were watching me fondly, and then I recognized faces. My sister, Abigail, Pastor James, who died of cancer years ago, my maternal grandmother, Emma, who prayed for me every night when I was a child. They were there, smiling, speechless. But I understood everything. They were saying, "You are not alone. We have always been here." The bridge seemed long, but at the same time, eternal. It was a space outside of time, and I realized that this was not just a crossing. It was a revelation. The revelation of life as it really is, a preparation. And at the end of the bridge, He was, the most intense light, Jesus. Now, not just as a presence, but with form. Human, yes, but also divine. His eyes seemed to contain the universe, and when He looked at me, it was as if my entire being was pierced by truth. Without a word, He made me see everything. Everything I could have been. Everything that could still be. And then he spoke. And the first sentence that came out of his mouth was, "Margaret, why do you think it's over?" At that moment, my knees went weak. I fell, and I cried. But what he said next changed the meaning of my existence. There he was, not as I imagined him in the illustrations of my old Bible, nor as I imagined him in the movies I watched with my grandchildren. Jesus was beyond any image. His presence was so immense, so pure, that I felt small, not in the sense of inferiority, but of reverence, as if my spirit were saying, "You stand before the Creator of time, life, and eternity." He had eyes that didn't just see, they went right through me, read me, understand me without me saying a word. And even though he knew everything about me, the best and the worst, he looked at me with tenderness, with mercy. When he said, "Margaret, why do you think you're done?" something inside me broke. I cried, and they weren't tears of sadness, but tears of surrender. It was like my heart was saying, "I didn't know, Lord. I thought my time was up." And then he came closer. I felt as if the entire universe tilted as he took a step. And with a voice that seemed to be made of wind and fire, he said, "You still have something to do. You haven't been forgotten. I'm not done with you." My knees touched that golden floor, and I could only whisper, "But I am so flawed, so small. How can I be used?" Then he reached down and touched my face, and I swear in that touch, all the pain that was left in me disappeared. And he said something I will never forget. "I don't use the perfect ones. I use the available ones." And then he started showing me scenes, moments that I lived, but with his eyes. I saw the day I made soup for a sick neighbor, and how it stopped her from taking her own life. I saw the time I hugged my grandson after he was bullied at school, and that hug made him feel worthy of existing. Simple things, small in my eyes, giants in the eyes of heaven. And that's when I understood. Heaven doesn't measure impact like the world does. There, love is the unit of measurement. Jesus then showed me two roads, a calm, definitive era, enveloped in peace, the end of my journey. The other shone brightly, but was full of pain, struggle, and challenges. It was life, the continuation. And he said, "You can choose. What do you want, Margaret?" I hesitated. For a moment, I almost begged to stay. But then I heard a faint, distant, but faith-filled voice. It was Lily, my granddaughter, praying beside me in the hospital. "Jesus, please, give me Grandma back." My heart sank. I looked at him, trembling, and whispered, "If there is still purpose, then send me back." And he smiled. A smile that made the entire sky shine. And before I could say anything else, everything went dark. I was coming back, but I would come back different, very different. And before I could say anything else, everything went dark. I was coming back, but I would come back different, very different. There, between two worlds, with Jesus before me and my granddaughter calling me back, I made the most difficult and most beautiful choice of my life. And now, if you've made it this far, I invite you to leave a comment. If it were you there, before him, what would you say? What would you ask? I read each message with an open heart, and maybe your answer is what another soul needs to read today. The darkness wasn't cold. It was like a veil gently closing, as if the sky were saying, "Not yet." I felt a tug, not on my body, but on my soul, a force calling me back, pulling me from that place of light and peace. And then, suddenly, pain, cold, noises, the high-pitched sound of monitors, rushing voices, a rapid beeping sound. I opened my eyes, white light, doctors' faces, masks, a nurse letting out a scream, a doctor shaking the clipboard in his hands. She's back. My God, she's back. My lungs burned as if they were relearning how to breathe. Everything was a blur. But one thing I knew, I was no longer in heaven. I was back. I began to cry, not out of sadness, but because the memory of his presence still burned within me. And there, between sobs, I said my first words. I saw Jesus. He cried with me. Silence. One of the nurses fell to his knees. The nurse who was holding my wrist began to pray quietly, not caring about anything else. The doctors were perplexed. She was dead, they said. 7 minutes without a pulse. That's impossible. But I knew. I didn't come back alone. Someone brought me back. In the days that followed, I was kept under observation. Exams, tests, questions. Skeptical doctors tried to find explanations. Minimal brain activity, they said. But she is lucid, oriented, with full memory. What no one knew was that I had come back with something that could not be scanned or measured. I had come back with a purpose, and also with a weight. Because when you see pure love, absolute love, it is impossible to live the same way. Every look, every gesture, every word now carried a new meaning. And I knew life was no longer just mine. Jesus had given me more time, but not by chance. I had to tell. I had to announce it. My days in the hospital became a strange mix of medical tests and spontaneous prayers. Nurses who had once come to take my blood pressure now asked to hold my hands and listen to my story. Some cried. Others sat in silence, just feeling. But I hadn't told him everything yet. Something inside me told me that the right moment was coming. And it did. 15 days after my discharge, I was invited by the church where I had attended for over 40 years to give a brief testimony. The hall was full. People were standing in the aisles. Young people who had never noticed me before were there, attentive. Even distant neighbors appeared. It seemed as if something had called them, the same something that had brought me back. I stepped up to the pulpit with my heart trembling, not with fear, but with reverence. I took a deep breath and spoke. My name is Margaret Thompson. I am 82 years old, and I died, but Jesus brought me back. The silence that followed was absolute, so I began to tell. Not with dramatizations, not with exaggerations, just truth. I spoke of the field of light, of the bridge, of his eyes, of the question he asked me, and of the choice I made for love. When I mentioned that I heard my granddaughter praying and that it made me come back, I saw a mother crying while hugging her son. When I said that Jesus doesn't want the perfect, but the available, I heard an amen coming from a young man who had never spoken in church. And when I finished, something happened. Someone filmed it. A boy from church posted it on YouTube with the title, "She Died and Came Back," after seeing Jesus, Margaret's testimony. I didn't even know how it worked, but for the next few hours, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. People from other states, people saying, "Margaret, after your video, I started praying again. Margaret, you made me believe again. Margaret, can I tell you what I saw when I almost died too?" The video surpassed 1 million views in just 4 days. I had no idea what viral meant. All I knew was that God was reaching hearts through me, an 82-year-old woman who had already packed her funeral clothes. But now I understood. This was my mission. He brought me back to talk, to wake up, to remind people that there is something beyond, and that this beyond has a name, Jesus. And that was just the beginning. I never imagined that my testimony, recorded on a shaking cell phone in the hands of a young man from church, could cross continents. The day after the video was posted, my granddaughter ran to me from the living room. "Grandma, your video has already been viewed over 500,000 times. I smiled, somewhat confused. Back in my day, news spread by word of mouth. Now, all it took was a touch. On the third day, it reached 1 million. TV stations started calling. Christian radio stations wanted interviews. Pastors from other states asked me to give the same testimony in their churches. Emails came from all over, from Texas, California, Alaska, even from abroad. But the most beautiful thing wasn't the fame. It was the impact. Messages came like this. "Margaret, I was about to take my own life. I saw your video by chance and stopped myself. I started talking to my mother again after hearing you talk about forgiveness. You made me pray again, after 20 years. My daughter had an NDE at age 6. She described Jesus as you. I cried so hard watching it. I began to understand that this wasn't just my story. It was the story of many. It was a reminder that there is something beyond this world and that eternity is not a fantasy. It is a promise. And it didn't stop there. A large YouTube channel known for exploring supernatural cases did a special about my experience. The host, an avowed former atheist, interviewed theologians, doctors, and neurologists. At the end, he himself, moved, said in a low voice, "Maybe there really is someone waiting for us. And maybe faith isn't just an idea." This video hit 10 million views in just 1 week. My story became the subject of American TV talk shows. On one side, skeptical doctors tried to explain my experience as residual brain activity. On the other, Christian experts said, "The brain can deceive, but the spirit knows." The most impressive thing was to see a pastor, known for being cold and analytical, cry live on air while they played my video on the show. He said, "I've been preaching for 30 years, and today, for the first time, I felt like Jesus really spoke to me through this woman." His church, which had been almost empty, doubled in size in a month. And me? I continued to be Margaret, the 82-year-old lady in the floral dress, a Bible on her lap, and eyes that now saw the world differently. I realized that my return wasn't just for me. It was for them. It was for you. Because there's something about hearing from someone who's been there, who's seen it with their own eyes, and come back just to say, it's real, and it's worth it. Fame, if I can call it that, came like a tide, strong, unpredictable, and dangerous. With millions of views and invitations from all corners, it was only a matter of time before voices emerged, saying that it was all made up, exaggerated, or the delirium of a confused old woman. And they appeared. Talk shows began inviting me to live debates. Doctors, philosophers, atheist presenters. One of them, famous for ridiculing spiritual experiences, looked at me fixedly and said, "Mrs. Thompson, you know that the brain, when deprived of oxygen, can create hallucinations. What guarantees that what you saw was not just a beautiful dream of a dying mind?" I smiled, not arrogantly, but compassionately, and I responded with something that disarmed everyone. "Because, sir, dreams don't change hearts, but what I saw is changing the world." The audience fell silent. Another accused me of using my faith to gain money, fame, visibility. And there, on national television, I simply held out my worn-out Bible with pages marked by tears and time and said, "I didn't ask to come back. I didn't want a stage, but God gave me a voice, and if one soul is saved because of that, it was worth every bit of criticism." Even so, the pressure was intense. My family began to be harassed. Some friends distanced themselves. Even religious leaders I had known throughout my life became suspicious. "She's exaggerating," they said. "She must have mixed reality with emotion." But then, something happened that strengthened me. I received a letter. It was from a retired pastor in Chicago. He confessed that he had abandoned the ministry after losing his wife, having lost faith in everything. He said that when he watched my video, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades: hope. The letter ended like this: "Margaret, your testimony has rekindled my faith. I'm going back to preaching. Because if heaven was real to you, it can be real to me too." I cried like a child. That night, I knelt alone in my living room, in front of the same chair where I had prayed for my grandchildren so many times. And I said, "Lord, even if they mock me, even if they try to erase me, I will continue. Because I saw it, I know it, and no one can take that away from me." Jesus did not bring me back to please men. He brought me to remind the forgotten, to wake up the sleeping, to disturb the indifferent. I was 82 years old. The world expected me to be relaxing, crocheting, or gardening, but Jesus had other plans. Soon after the wave of interviews and debates, I began to receive different invitations, not from TV channels or radio programs, but from hospitals. Chaplains, nurses, even relatives of terminally ill patients sought me out. "Margaret, could you visit my father? He is dying and has lost his faith." My daughter is afraid to sleep. She saw death up close. "There's a whole wing that just needs someone like you." And so, I went. Even with weak legs, a bad back, and the doctors advising me to rest, I went. Every step I took was out of obedience. Every room I entered was like crossing that bridge of light again, but now with a purpose: to take others with me. I started visiting hospitals in Savannah, then Atlanta, Then I was invited to medical centers in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. In each place, a face, a pain, a story, and a heart that needed to hear. I died, but I came back, and Jesus is waiting for you with open arms. I remember an 11-year-old boy with advanced leukemia who asked me, "Does it hurt to die, Mrs. Margaret?" I held his little hand and replied tenderly, "It hurts more to live without love than to die while being waited for by him." He smiled and left 2 days later, in peace. I began to write down every visit, every prayer, every face. My oldest grandson helped me turn this into a book. The title came easily, 7 Minutes in Heaven. The book spread like the video. It was adopted by churches, support clinics, grief groups, chaplaincies. But more than that, it became a channel of comfort. Because somehow people knew that I wasn't telling a theory. I was telling what I saw, what I felt, what I lived. And so my motto was born, which I repeat to this day wherever I go. I came back for love. The mission is not over yet. And it was true. Even though I was tired, even though I was facing criticism, even though I saw my body getting older every day, I knew. As long as my heart was beating, the message needed to be said. Jesus lives. Eternity is real. And we are not alone. The years passed like the pages of a book that one reads slowly, savoring each word. Since that day I returned, I have lived with purpose. I have spoken in dozens of churches, hugged hundreds of people in hospitals, answered thousands of letters. But one day, I knew. Not because of pain, not because of a clinical examination, but because I felt the same sacred silence that I felt before leaving the first time. It was an autumn afternoon. Leaves were falling in the yard as if time was preparing to rest as well. I sat on the porch with the Bible in my lap and felt that gentle breeze that did not come from this world. "Is it time, Lord?" I asked silently. And within me, peace answered, yes. There was no fear, no despair. There was only one need, to bring everyone together. I called my children. I called my grandchildren. I made cookies, as I always did. And I played the old hymn we sang in church, "I'll Fly Away." Everyone arrived. Some knew, others didn't want to accept it. But when they saw me there, serene, dressed in that blue dress I wore to Lily's baptism, they understood. I sat down with each one. I gave them advice. I prayed with them. I asked for forgiveness where I felt I should. I forgave where I was not asked. I handed the book to my oldest grandson and said, "You continue. Tell the story. But more than that, live it." At the end of the day, I asked that we all pray together. My children around me, my grandchildren kneeling. The whole house seemed to breathe faith. I finished the prayer with a weak but firm voice. "Jesus, I'm ready. Come get me." I leaned back on the couch. I felt my heart slow down, like someone who carefully turns off the light so as not to wake anyone up. The last thing I heard was the sound of someone singing softly. My granddaughter Lily, now 18, singing the same hymn, "I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away." And then I flew. This time, not to return, but with the sweetest certainty that anyone can carry in their chest. I fulfilled my mission. My funeral was simple, just as I wanted. No expensive flowers, no long speeches, just a service with old hymns, readings from my marked Bible, and emotional voices singing along. Amazing grace. But what happened next? No one expected. The ceremony was streamed online at my family's request, and soon thousands began to pour in. People from Texas, North Carolina, California, and abroad. Comments flowed like rivers of virtual tears. She never saw me, but she changed my life. Margaret made me come back to church after 20 years. Thanks to her testimony, today I believe that I will see my mother again in heaven. Pastors have shown clips of the ceremony at their services. Chaplains have used my story to comfort grieving parents. Young people have written songs inspired by my journey. A filmmaker who is an atheist has begun a documentary about near-death experiences, starting with mine. But none of this surprises me, because I knew from the moment I heard Jesus call me by name that that mission was greater than my 82 years. It was eternal. My Bible was passed to Lily, and in it, I wrote in bold letters on the back cover, If you hear his voice, say yes. Today she leads a small group of young people, and she tells my story in schools, on retreats, and even in videos on the internet. The same granddaughter who prayed for me to return now prays for others to find the same Jesus. The book 7 Minutes in Heaven has become one of the most widely read works in Christian groups and hospitals. But more importantly, it has become a meeting point between doubt and faith, between pain and hope. And now, with you here, reading my last words, my heart rejoices again, because I don't know who you are, where you are, or what you're facing. But I do know one thing: you are not alone. Heaven is real. Jesus is alive. And when your time comes, he will call you by name too, as he did for me. So, if this story touched your heart, I ask you just one thing: share, spread. Let others know that eternity is not the end. It is the beginning. Because I left earth crying, but I entered heaven smiling, and I'm here, waiting for you.